Three friends entered an abandoned hospital at midnight. Only one escaped. This is the story of St. Mercy Hospital. Like and subscribe before we begin.
It was the kind of rain that never sounded like rain. In Willow's Hollow, it sounded like the town itself was whispering, a low, constant static against the windows. Locals called it persistent, stubborn weather, clouds that tagged along for weeks, gutters that never quite stopped leaking, and the smell of wet iron that clung to everything. The real magic, if you could call it that, was the stories. Legends in West Virginia have weight. They gather like mold around old truths. St. Mercy Hospital sat on a hill above town, a blackened tooth in the skyline since the fire in 1998. People crossed the street to avoid its shadow. Mothers told their kids not to play near the chain link, and teenagers dared one another across bars of rust. Old men in the diner still lowered their voices when they said its name. Children, some would say, the word tasting like an accusation. Small rooms, too many locks. It burned quick on a wet Tuesday in October. 3 kids from school leaned over a cluttered dining table in Maya's kitchen, plotting content rather than punishment. Maya's laptop glowed and hummed, her camera waited like a trained eye. She was 20, fearless and precise, the kind of friend who wrote checklists in the margins of panic. Ethan was 16, thin and quiet, listening as if the world might spill secrets into his open palms. Chris, 19, tried to be the comic relief but kept rubbing his palms together under the table. Nerves, Maya guessed, not jokes. "We go in at midnight," Maya said, tapping a timestamp on her screen. She listed the goals like a mission. Live stream, check the 3rd floor, find proof of the old children's wing, get footage for the intro. "This will blow up," Chris said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Ethan only nodded. Curiosity flattened his expression into focus. He'd grown up with St. Mercy's silhouette behind Sunday drives. The stories gnawed at him. Something about a place that could eat rumors and still stand felt like a missing puzzle piece. They posted the challenge. They joked at the top, no ghosts, no refunds. The town watched them go. St. Mercy rose in the rain like a memory refusing to fade. A chain-link gate hung from one hinge. Ivy crawled over the burned brick. Windows were black mouths. The hospital's sign sagged. Beneath the soot, somebody had spray-painted a childish heart. The door gave with a brittle creak, and the smell hit first. Stale smoke, wet dust, and a sour sweetness like old medicine. Maya clicked her camera on, voice low and steady. "Everything's rolling," she whispered. "Audio hot, lights ready." Inside, the building remembered how to terrify. The main hall stretched in a yawning corridor, lit by intermittent flashes of the emergency lights. Red exit signs flickered, not steady but like a pulse, on, casting blood-colored squares across the linoleum. Rusted wheelchairs leaned in shadowy alcoves, their wheels frozen like they'd been waiting for a long-lost patient. The walls peeled in thick curls, mold clung to corners. Scrawled in crayon on yellowed paper in one small room, a child's drawing of a sun with too many teeth. A mother's handwriting on a plaque had been warped by heat, a name blurred into nothing. Audio became alive. Each footstep scraped differently, a separate instrument in an orchestra of the decayed. A distant hum like an elevator finding its way stirred the air, and somewhere down the hall a door creaked shut with a polite, human finality. Maya kept talking, narrating details into the camera, amplification for the feed. "3rd floor is our target. Children's wing, north corridor, right." Chris laughed once, brittle as glass. Ethan drifted ahead, drawn to a corridor that felt less charred and more like it had been peeled open. They found a nurse's station where old charts tumbled in the dust. VHS tapes sat in a shoebox like a confession. Maya's hand shook only slightly as she picked one up. The label had a date and a patient number, scrawled in a quick, impersonal hand. "These probably have actual footage," she said, exchanging a look with Ethan. He felt resolved. Evidence could be like a key. The hospital wasn't a static tomb, it breathed. Corridors lengthened when you tried to remember which had led where. Doors that had been there minutes before were gone. Others appeared with a soft, deliberate clack. The elevator, an ancient iron cube, slid open on its own, light sputtering. Chris stepped back. "Nope," he said into his teeth. Maya pushed forward anyway, camera level, heart boxed in the frame. The elevator hummed a low mechanical inhale and moved a floor with no weight, no living fingers inside. They kept going, the silence broken by rustles, distant whispers that could be rain. Could be wood, could be voices. At first it was half-heard syllables in the vents, like someone practicing language just out of earshot. Then it grew louder, two voices, high and breathy, rising in a sing-song that edged into a hum. A child's melody, simple and slow, came down from the stairwell. Maya froze, fingers pressing the camera tight. Ethan's breath fogged before his lips. "Hello," Chris called, trying too hard. The answer was a tick and the hum again, closer this time, as if pressed against the plaster. They found a room with toys, moldering stuffed animals arranged in a ring, each one facing an empty center. In the doorway was a small, empty cot with a blankie still folded at the foot. On the wall, dozens of crayon drawings had been pinned, smiling stick figures, houses, names. One drawing depicted the hospital with a square of red above it, an exit sign. A child had written below the scribbled "Son, red light comes." Then doors started to vanish. Maya reached for the handle of a side door and her fingers met only paint and warped wood. The door was gone and the frame opened to another corridor. The camera caught the moment, their reflections, pale and small, bent and then swallowed. Panic snaked through them. Ethan grabbed the frame, feeling it press like a living mouth. He wasn't sure if he was trying to keep the building contained or if the building was trying to keep him. They split up briefly, stupid, human choice. Maya insisted on recording the tapes. Chris wanted to laugh at his fear in the stairwell. Ethan followed a faint red glow upward. The third-floor stairwell smelled of soot and something sweeter beneath. Steps crumbled underfoot and then held, as if remembering better days. The burned scars on the third floor were Rower, its corridors halfway between ruin and something almost ritualistic. Charred paper fluttered with every breath the building took. The red exit signs here were constant, not flicker, a dozen tiny suns in a corridor that wanted to be a throat. A child's ghost hummed the tune again, closer, like it could carve itself clean from the plaster. Then Chris vanished. He had been ahead, joking, big reveal. "I'm gonna," and then the floor made a noise like someone snapping a giant's knuckle. Ethan turned in time to see the corridor swallow him. One heartbeat, a laugh the next, a hollow slab of wall where Chris had been. He was gone as if erased. The footage captured it, Ethan's shout, Maya's camera spinning, the red exit sign strobing overhead as if applauding the disappearance. "Chris," Maya's voice collapsed into something too thin to carry. She ran, adrenaline and shame braided. They called his name until their throats bit them, their words evaporating on the burned air. The intercom, long dead, crackled like a radio trying to remember a station, and then, with a wet, electrical shudder, came on. The speaker didn't emit static. First it played the hum, then a child's voice, soft and flat, "Don't leave us." The words folded through the corridor. Primeval and small, they found recording after recording in a sealed office that smelled like old bleach and secrets. Old VHS tapes were the worst kind of history, grainy faces, doctors in stiff coats, monitors beeping with the flat patience of death. A single tape labeled 1997 hummed on a decrepit VCR. Faces blinked in the pale tape light, children, smiling at the camera, then being led out of frame by nurses who did not smile. A man in a suit took notes with the calm of someone marking boxes. The captions on the footage blinked clinical. Behavioral response trials, pediatric group C, one label read, long-term sedative protocols. The camera lingered over a whiteboard where names had been wiped but initials remained. AM, JR, CW. Maya's breath was a metronome of panic. "They were experimenting," she whispered, her voice stuck between horror and vindication. Ethan's hands felt like they belonged to someone else as he pressed play on a tape marked Emergency 8/14/98. The tape tasted like ash. The screen fluttered to a scene of the hospital, alarmed, corridors full of shouting nurses, an overanxious doctor pinning down a child. Then the footage jumped static, but under the snow you could hear a voice say, clipped and calm, "Containment breach. Children non-responsive. Repeat, do not inform family." The story laid itself across their lungs. Children had been part of experiments, children had gone missing in official accounts, and then one night, fire had erased the records. But the tape kept the truth like a ghost in magnetic tape. The hospital had tried to bury it in soot, and the building was not content to be found out. They moved like trapped animals now. Shadows lengthened and condensed into figures dark and tall, bending with impossible angles. They pursued them or they led them. It was impossible to tell. At one point, Ethan and Maya turned a corner and the corridor behind them had become false. Wallpaper hung like skin, and their own footsteps echoed from a hallway that no one walked. A child's humming echoed from above, below, everywhere, and the sound crawled inside their skulls like someone painting the inside of their heads with cold. There were chase scenes stitched to panic. Doors slammed in their faces and then opened to longer runs. A shadow lapped at Maya's heels, something that multiplied her reflection until she no longer knew whether the thing chasing her had lungs. Chris's laughter, snatches of it, filtered through vents. They followed it, the sound sticky with hope, and it ended at a laundry chute, empty and smelling of soot. His jacket lay there as if dropped by someone who had been reading the room. Ethan's hands shook when he picked it up. One corridor collapsed into a stairwell that led down and out into an operating room suspended like a theater. Surgical lamps hung like pale moons. The operating table had scorch marks and children's drawings tucked into its seam like prayer offerings. The intercom spat phrases, looping, "Containment breach." "Initiate sedation." The voice was not entirely mechanical. Sometimes, unnervingly, it took on the high pitch of a child. The hospital rearranged itself into a maze that felt like a mind. Hallways circled back on regrets. A door that had been a supply closet became a nursery. A window that once faced the parking lot now looked out over a field of blackened beds. They were running out of options and air. Maya's camera captured them in rapid jerks, faces streaming with wet fear, breathing loud and thin. Eyes reflecting red exit lights like carnivorous moons. The climax found them clawing up to the burned third floor, where the fire had been worst. The walls here had fused into a black topology, the plaster folded like charred flesh. The air tasted of old embers and something else, paper turning, a smell like 100 closed mouths. The red exit signs there did not flicker. They glowed steady in Alter's heart. A small door, paint peeled to reveal childish fingerprints, stood at the end of the hall. Behind it lay the remains of a ward for the smallest patients. They pushed it, and the room breathed. The temperature dropped. Shadows pooled in the corners like ink. For a second, time simplified into a single, terrible understanding. The children had been locked away to stop whatever experimented result had manifested. And a decision had been made to hide the failure beneath flames, rather than face blame. The tapes had shown it. Their own eyes confirmed it in the blackened cots and singed toys. One by one, wisps of movement coalesced into children, faces like pale smudges, eyes reflecting the red exits, swaying, unlatching. Their humming harmonized into a chorus and then shifted, pleading and accusing, "Don't leave us." The chorus pulled at Ethan's legs. He tried to pry himself free, his muscles unraveling into panic. Maya screamed as a shadow wrapped around her ankles. Her camera clattered, catching a moment where something opened its mouth and the world went thin. Like film over a bulb, Ethan's legs worked by the muscle memory of fear. He ran, Maya stayed, fighting, arms flailing. The camera jammed on a frame that kept her wide-eyed in the dark. A hand, small and cold, grabbed Ethan's sleeve for one breath, a child's grip strong with accusation. He tore away. Behind him there was a sound like a small body breaking open, and a cry that sounded suspiciously like someone saying his name. He got out through a corridor that refused to let him go with anything. Resembling mercy. Doors slammed shut as if disappointed he had found the exit. The rain welcomed him like a curtain, masking his sobs. At the chain-link gate his legs finally stopped running, and he collapsed into mud and rain. He sat there until the sky lightened with the first thin ribbon of dawn, and the town came to call him a boy who'd come out of a haunted place. They searched for weeks. Maya found a patch of camera footage later, half burned and recovered, showing her running into a stairwell while Chris's laugh echoed and then stopped. The authorities concluded the building was structurally unsound. Rumors about experiments were dismissed as adolescent fantasy fueled by urban legend. Willow's Hollow moved between empathy and forgetting. The police shook their heads and wrote reports. A missing person chalk outline never existed for Chris. The town's ledger preferred to write memory in polite erasures. Ethan returned to his mother's small house with the camera clutched like a relic. The tapes, the VHS, the footage Maya saved, everything was evidence and curse. He slept poorly, waking with the impression of tiny breaths in the room or the weight of a small hand resting on his shoulder. For a while, the red exit lights were only a nightmare, fugitive rectangles flashing in the dark corners of his mind. On the 15th night after the visit, exactly 3 weeks by rain and by reckoning, Ethan woke to a sound he knew like a second heartbeat. The soft, metallic click of a fluorescent tube warming. He blinked at the ceiling and saw an impossible rectangle glowing on the wall opposite his bed, red, steady. For a long second he thought he was still in the hospital, that the maze had found him at home. His breath hitched, his throat closed on a scream. He reached for the light switch, nothing. The rectangle pulsed with patient insistence. Then the intercom voice, his mother's old answering machine voice, high and wobbly, blew a child's whisper right into his room. "Don't leave us." Ethan's lungs emptied on reflex. He scrambled out of bed, the camera that Maya had given him clanging as he grabbed it, fingers fumbling. He filmed the sign as if documenting proof again, but even the digital red lacked the depth of the live one. The footage showed a rectangle of broken pixels and then went dead. He turned the house upside down. No wires, no projector, no prank. Only rain, that constant Willow's Hollow static, and a quietness so complete it left space for the smallest sound to become a scream. He tried to convince himself he had brought the hospital back with him, that trauma molds your dreams into architecture and memory. He lay down and counted the seconds until dawn and tried to sleep through an itch at the back of his skull that whispered in unfamiliar keys. At 3:13 a.m. The time stamped on the burned tapes, and the moment the alarm in the hospital had first failed, the red rectangle glowed brighter. It was on his bedroom wall, impossible and honest, an exit sign that had no business being inside paint and drywall. It hummed like an elevator starting, the low mechanical tone swelling into the room like a tide. Ethan watched the sign. The humming settled into a child's hum overlaid with another sound, someone breathing close to his ear. He turned his head, and for a heartbeat the dark silhouette of small shoulders was framed at the foot of his bed, human and wrong at once. The figure did not move, but Ethan felt the pressure of its gaze and the precise sense that something he had left inside that hospital had never intended to be left behind. The last footage on his camera was a hand, small and syrup-slow, reaching out for the red glow. The frame stopped there, saturated in color like memory burned into film. The final audio on the recovered clip was a whisper layered over the hum, a dozen small voices harmonizing into one simple small sentence. "You came back." Ethan's mouth opened. A soundless answer caught between panic and some terrible relief. Outside, the rain kept talking to itself. The exit sign pulsed once more, red and absolute, and the house agreed to let it stay.
St. Mercy never let them leave. Like, subscribe, and come back for more horror stories. If you dare,